Greetings of the day. I'm Dr. Magdalene Peter, HOD, Department of Management Studies, Bharat Institute of Higher Education and Research. And in today's video lecture series, in the subject of business communication, we are going to see about the process of communication and the barriers to communication. Let's get started. Business communication. I put this picture because the moment we hear the word communication, at once this person's face came to my memory. What a kind of communication, mastery of language, the type of poetic language that flows from his mouth. One should get a cue on how to have a beautiful communication from this person. Okay, what is communication? In my previous lectures, I've told you that communication is originated from the Latin word which means communis, which means something in common. So communication is the sharing of information between two or more individuals or groups to reach a common understanding. So in the definition of communication, what we have to first of all understand is two underlying concepts. One is understanding and the other is the feedback. So your communication will be considered complete only when you are able to put across or deliver whatever that is in your mind to the mind of the other person who is listening to you. So that is what is all about communication. So the sharing of your information, the sharing of your thoughts to the other person, which creates a common understanding. Common understanding means understanding the point of view or understanding the viewpoints that are put across from the premise or from the point of view of the sender. So that is what is called as common understanding. And this understanding usually invokes a kind of a response, and that is the feedback. Not always it could be a positive feedback. Sometimes it could be a negative feedback. It could also be a positive feedback, but some kind of feedback has to be elicited out of a communication process so as the process to be complete. So basically, communication is nothing but sharing of information. To whom do you share this information? To a group of people, between two or more individuals or groups of people to reach a common understanding and feedback. So this is what is essentially what is communication. Now we'll get into what is the communication process. So everything goes through a process, and there is a process for communication also. The first step in the model of a communication process is the sender. Sender is none but the person who has got the idea. The idea has originated in the minds of the sender, and he wants to put forth this idea to the other person. So what does this sender do? He encodes, he translates the idea that is there in his mind in the form of a message. So the sender has got the idea. The second step, he encodes the idea. And the third, after drafting the message, he sends the message through a channel. The message travels through a channel to the person to whom it is intended to, that is the receiver. So after receiving the message, the receiver decodes the message. That is, he reads the message and tries to understand what is the content of the message. So that is decoding. Now, after decoding, a feedback from the receiver travels back to the sender. Okay, now if the sender gives a question or asks for more clarity from the receiver as a feedback, then the sender again gives some kind of a feedback to the receiver. So the feedback has to be both ways, from the receiver to the sender, then again from the sender to the receiver. So this is the process of communication. And in between, you will have hindrances or barriers. That is called noise in the communication process. Suppose in case, for example, let's say that a salesman is getting a call from his superior. Superior is in the office and the salesman is on the streets traveling. So when the call is coming, he's receiving the call and he's speaking on the call, but then Too much of background noises, traffic and all is there in the road. Therefore, he is not able to properly hear what the superior is conveying to him, and therefore he is not in a position to receive the message properly in its totality. Now, what is the reason for the barrier of this communication? It is external environment. That is what is called as noise. Sometimes it could be a physical noise, like traffic, like car horns, bus horning, etc. on the road, or it could be a psychological disturbance in your mind, that your mind is preoccupied because of some matter, that you don't devote your full attention to the message that you are hearing. There, it's not listening, it's only hearing. Therefore, you're not able to fix the message properly. So any disturbance that distorts the process, the free flow of the message from the sender to the receiver through a transmission channel, it's called as noise or barriers to communication. So this is the communication model, and what the noises that can be affecting the free flow of your communication is depicted or categorized as barriers to communication. So this is what we're going to look at in today's lecture elaborately. Analysis of a flawed communication process. This is just a classic example of how communication, the words could be distorted. Now, sender has an idea. Somebody is rowing the boat and he wants to give the warning to the boatman. So he says, warn the boater, because maybe the boater is going too deep into the sea and there is a chance of the boater being drowned. Therefore, the sender wants to give the message to the boater saying that I want to give you a warning. Now, he encodes the message saying that it is low water. So you don't go dive deep into the sea because there's low water, there's chance of the boat being capsized. Now the channel which carries the message, maybe he's shouting into the air, and the air, when it's carrying the message to the other person, is distorting the message, the noise, the barrier, the hindrance, and the receiver is hearing the message as low water, warn water, as hello Walter. See the kind of distortion of the message that is happening. The sender's idea is to warn the boater. So he encodes it in a way, it says about some kind of a warning. He says low water. Now, this low water, when it is being shouted into the air, what happens? The message is distorted and the receiver decodes the message as hello Walter. The very purpose of the warning is defeated. So this is the analysis through how, it is just a simple example of how messages could get transmitted or distorted through when they travel through a channel and end up in a totally different genre. Okay. Next, this is a classic example of how a particular order comes into a company and how they process it, but the customer has actually placed a totally different variety or totally different concept of what the product that was there in the mind of the customer. The encoding of the message went wrong. See, marketing is requesting for this kind of a swing to be made to the production department. So as you can see in the picture, so this is the swing that has been requested by the marketing department. Now the sales department is conceiving that idea as this. See the difference? This is the swing that they ordered, the marketing department requested. Now sales, they have a rope in between. So 3 ropes being tied up to the swing. There's no place to sit at all. And then this is how the engineering department has designed the product. Okay. Now you see how the production is manufacturing the product. This is the typical picture of how the production has actually, the production team has manufactured the product. And here, how the maintenance has installed the product. Okay. Now, here, this is what the customer wanted. So the customer originally placed an order for this kind of a swing to be made. Now the marketing requested, took it perception was completely different. The sales people perception was completely different. Production completely different. Engineering totally, maintenance and installation totally messed it up. So this is how, when a communication is passing through 2 or 3 or more channels, the message that is being conveyed will is likely to be distorted, and that is called as barriers to communication. Now we come back again to the communication process. It all starts with the sender. Now, who is this sender? Sender is a person wishing to share information with some other person. Now, who is this some other person? That person is the receiver. What he wishes to send, he wishes to send information or share information. That information is the message that he has to or he wants to communicate to the other party. So the first step is the sender. Second is the message, that is the information that is drafted in the form of a message. Encoding is the sender translating the message into symbols or language or in a written form which can be easily conceived or understood, comprehended by the receiver who receives it. Noise is anything that hampers to the communication process. So as I told you, noise could be a physical noise, a psychological noise, a cultural barrier, a language barrier. There are so many kinds of barriers that are available. Now, the receiver is a person or a group for which the message is intended. So for whom the sender is sending the message, for the receiver to receive it. So this is receivers, a group of people or a single person who wishes to receive the message. The medium is the pathway through which the message is being transmitted to the receiver. And decoding is a critical point where more amount of emphasis has to be given, because this is a point where the receiver interprets and tries to understand and make sense out of the message that he has received. So this is what is decoding. Encoding is sender translates his thoughts into writing and creates a message so that it can be easily fathomable by the receiver. Decoding is the receiver reads the message, tries to understand the message and interpret it in order to make sense. This is what is decoding. So this is the process of communication. So this communication flows through many channels. It could be a downward communication. It could be an upward communication. It could be a horizontal communication. So downward communication is from the top management, any instruction, policy, company's vision, mission, goal, policy manual, instructions, roles and responsibilities, anything that the company, the top management wants to convey to people down the line in the hierarchy is called downward communication. And after receiving these policies and goals and instructions, the employee tries to give the feedback about that to the employer. He tries to give a report of what he has done to the employer. He tries to make a presentation of his work, of his research findings to the employer. That is upward communication. Now, as we saw in the picture in the earlier slides, the marketing department is requesting for process of an order to the sales department, to the production department, manufacturing department, maintenance department, engineering department. So all these department heads are in the same line of hierarchy. So they will be communicating with each other, who are called as peers. These are called as horizontal communication, where majorly the horizontal communication is all about the task coordination and information sharing among the peers in the organization. So that is called as the horizontal communication. So we have the downward communication, which we saw that from the top management, any information, instructions that flows down to the lower channels in the hierarchy, it's called as downward communication. Any reporting or feedback that goes upwards to the top management from the lower management is called as the upward communication. And then we have the horizontal communication, where task coordination and information sharing happens among the peers. Then we have the verbal and the non-verbal communication, where verbal communication is encoding of messages in the form of words, which could be either written or spoken. Non-verbal communication is all about the encoding of messages by means of signs, postures, gestures, facial experience, expressions, body language, and your kind of personal upkeeping, the way that you dress, the way that you carry yourself, and all these things comprises of the non-verbal communication. We have then the communication networks, which is nothing but the pathways along which information flows to the groups and teams throughout the organization. So there could be many forms of formal channels of communication flowing in the organization, which could be a written communication, oral or electronic communication. Where written communication is nothing but the letters, the annual report, the company newsletter, the bulletins, the manuals, all these are categorized under the written communication. We have the oral communication, telephone communication, face-to-face communication, company meetings and team meetings. Then we have the electronic mails, the voice mail, the instant messaging, the intranet, the video conferencing. So all these can be categorized under the electronic medium of communication flow. Now, communication networks in groups and teams. So this communication flow could be in the form of a network, which can again be categorized as wheel network, chain network, circle network, and all channel network. Now, what is a wheel network? Information flows from one central member to all other members in the group. So that is a wheel network. Chain networks, members communicate only with people next to them, and that goes on in a sequence. That is immediate level of authority. Then we have the circle network, where members communicate with others close to them in terms of expertise, experience, and location. All channel is hybrid work, where networks in teams with high levels of communication between each member and all members. So this is the kind of communication networks in groups and teams. Now, this message distortion is just an example of how message could get distorted and the amount of message as received by the worker in the lower level. See, the board of directors are writing a message, okay, that is 100% amount of message. It's received by the vice president, only 63% is received. By the general supervisor, 56%. Plant manager 40%, team leader 30%, and down the line who actually executes the plan into action, that person receives only 20% out of the 100% of message that has been received. So 80% is lost through the various levels of communication. So this is how a downward communication operates through 5 levels of management. Then we have the barriers to communication. So as I told you, there are many barriers to communication. First barrier is perceptual and attribution barriers. Then we have conflicting assumptions. Inadequate information could be a barrier. Emotional blocks could be a barrier. Semantics could be a barrier. Non-verbal communication could be a barrier. Cultural barriers, inadequate communication media could be a barrier. Technological barriers. We'll see one by one. So barriers to communication, basically any factor that blocks or tries to distort successful flow of communication in a communication process could be categorized as a barrier. Okay. Now, this barrier could be a physical separation. So when a person is not meeting face to face, where there is physical distance, that itself could be a barrier. Status differences could be a barrier. In the hierarchy level, when the toppest authority speaks to the lowest authority, that status quo itself will bias the mind of the receiver. Therefore, you will not be able to receive the message in its totality. Gender differences, male, female. So this kind of male chauvinism and women fighting for emancipation and all these underlying ideas try to cascade the mind, and therefore that gender differences could be a major block in the process of communication. We have cultural diversity, where the custom tradition that has been followed is totally different, and there could be a misunderstanding arising because of cultural differences. Language. Language could be a major barrier, because other than mother tongue, when we are attempting to speak in another language, we have to understand to speak the other language without the influence of our mother tongue. We have to be very mindful of the grammar that we are using in the other language. Therefore, in case we tend to use a different word, a wrong word, the total message could be interpreted or perceived in a totally different angle than what we are meaning. Therefore, language could also be a very strong barrier to communication, unless and until the message that is put across is proofread and checked many times before it gets to the into the channel. Then we have the perceptual and attribution biases. Now, what is perception and attribution? See, experience is different and it causes wrong interpretation. So common experience gives common meaning. So they say first impression is the best impression, but it need not be the lasting impression. Just because your perceptual mind, your mind has perceived that at the first encounter, there's something negative that happened. Therefore, throughout, you have that kind of a bias in your mind whenever you see that person. And therefore, even if their intentions are pure, it is biased. You think it is biased. So this is what is common experience. Because of previous experience, a person could generally let the previous experience to cascade into the present situation. Therefore, there could be a difference of opinion. Conflicting assumptions. Sender assumes one thing when when he is decoding the message. The receiver decodes the message in a totally different perspective and gets it all wrong. So this is a conflicting assumption barrier. So sender should always not assume that the receiver will decode the message in the same way that he has encoded. Rather, he has to put himself in the shoes of the receiver, and from his premise, if he is able to decode the message, then encoding will be encode the message, then decoding will be in the same premise of the sender. So this is what is conflicting assumptions. Conflicting assumptions is nothing but where the sender assumes that the receiver also will be having the same wavelength of his intentions and thoughts. Then we have the codes of past experience. So because in case if I know too much of facts, or if I'm very knowledgeable, expertise in a particular area, or my beliefs are different, my attitude is different, so I enjoy a particular social role in the status quo in the community, my value system is also another major role that plays in the coding of past experiences, the language that we use, the memories that we carry. All these are parameters which could likely influence the kind of information that we are trying to perceive or trying to interpret from whatever that we have received. Then we have inadequate information. So this inadequate information will lead to unwanted confusion in the minds of the people who are receiving the information. So managers should ensure that they provide complete and whole information in order for the receivers to decode it in a way that is acceptable. Then we have semantics. Semantics is nothing but the usage of words in a particular language. So in English, if you see one word, I've just given one example where one word charge is been used so many different sentences I've given which with the word charge, but each of the sentences has got a different meaning. You charge someone a fee for service. You charge something you purchase to pay later. You charge a battery. You charge an official with duties to perform. You charge a horse into battle. You get a charge out of something funny. You charge a criminal for crimes committed. The Navy uses a depth charge. In each of the words in the sentences, you see the word charge being repeated, but in each of the sentence, the meaning of the word charge is different. So this is how words play in the English language. And English language, if you see, is the most used and accepted medium of expression in the corporate world. Therefore, you have to have control, or you have to have in-depth knowledge about the words that you're using so that your communication is not misinterpreted. Emotional blocks. Emotional blocks, needless to say, any psychological disturbances that is not allowing you to fully concentrate and perceive the message could be categorized as an emotional block. So experiences have an emotional or feeling component. So if you let your feelings get the best of you, then at times you will not be able to perceive what is being told to you from an objective stand. Non-verbal communication barriers. So non-verbal cues are the body language, the gestures, the facial expressions, your eye movement, your behavior, your touching, so forth. All these can be categorized or grouped as non-verbal communication. Physical characteristics, your body shape, your physique, your posture, height, weight, hair, skin color, all these comprises of physical characteristics. You have paralanguage, your the vocalics that you use, the tempo, the pitch, the volume, the rate, your non-influencers that you'll be using, like yeah, laughing, all these are your paralanguage. Your proxemics is how you use the space. I told you it could be your physical space, the distance that you have to maintain, or the psychological space that you have to give to the other person to open up to you and to accept you. Then time, being late or early, being punctual, to keep others waiting, all these are, or again, non-verbal communication barriers. Cultural barriers could be your language barriers, your native customs, your religious customs. That which is very holy for you could not be perceived in the same way by the other person. So all these are cultural barriers. Then you have inadequate communication media. That is, use of wrong media to convey your message to the receiver could completely distort the message, or it could lead to too much of wastage of time, effort, and cost. Therefore, inadequate communication media is again a barrier. Then we have technological barriers, which receiver does not have the ability or the technological capability to decode your message. Then the technological barrier could totally ruin the communication process. Therefore, technological barriers are also should be taken into consideration. Now, guidelines for effective communication. So, in order to minimize the role of noise in the communication process of yours, you can or should follow certain parameters which will help you, or which will be a guideline for effective communication, which could create a common understanding of sharing of information. First is feedback. Feedback is very, very important. So when you're able to elicit a feedback, then that means your communication is complete and it's been understood by the other person. Empathy. Empathy is nothing but putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. So that is why I told you the sender should not have conflicting assumptions. He should not be assuming that the receiver will be having the same length of his intellect. He has to put himself, the sender has to put himself in the shoes of the receiver and then construct a message. Then the message will be whole and complete in its totality. Modify message according to audience. So this is again the same extension of empathy. You have to first of all understand who your target audience are, and then for that audience you have to customize your message. Then multiple channels. Don't be unwantedly sometimes involving multiple channels, or sometimes don't be always dependent on one single channel. So you have to use your discretion to find out whether multiple channels are okay or single channel is okay for a particular message to flow to the receiver. Use of grapevine could also lend a good kind of a feedback to you sometimes. Then the sense of timing. Timing is very, very important. So this is what is all about the proxemics that we studied earlier, away the barriers of non-verbal communication. So you have to have the sense of timing. You should know when to let go and when to draw near. So that is what is the sense of timing. Clarity of purpose. What you intend to say, that you intend to say at the right time to the right person in a right context. So that is what is clarity. Completeness. Give complete information. If you're stating facts and figures or statistical data, give also the source from where the messages come. Concise. Keep it short. and sweet. Please don't be beating about the bush saying the same thing again and again. Comprehensive is you give even without asking for more clarification, your message, if it is complete, then it will not be lacking the parameter of clarity of purpose. Consultation. Before even sending a message across, you consult with other people to find out whether your message is in totality. Integrity is nothing but the credibility that you have to ensure. The reliable, consistent information has to be, trustworthy information has to be given. So this is all about the guidelines for effective communication. Thank you.